Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Thought I'd start this new channel up just to sort of talk about our thoughts on news, polling, how the political parties are doing. I'll be honest, I vote Reform. I am a Reform supporter, but it's interesting to just see, how they're doing, compare it with everyone else, and look at the general trends and sort of thought I'd give my thoughts and opinions and sort of a general take on what this means, where we're going, see what everyone thinks. So, yeah, this is a poll from YouGov this week, 2nd, 3rd November, when it was done. And reform of stayed steady on like 27%. I think the last poll that YouGov did was also 27%. Labour +3 this time, they were down 3 last time. Greens are like starting to slowly catch up. I mean, since Zach Valansky took over, they definitely seem to have seen a little bit of a bump. They were polling around sort of like 10, 11% for ages. Lib Dems seem to be. I feel like Lib Dems have really like kind of hit their kind of like peak. I mean, maybe they can go like 1 or 2%, but I feel like they've kind of like cheesed first past the post, and there's not really much further for them to go. They can maybe get a few more seats, but they're kind of. I feel like they're reaching their kind of like potential like peak of people who want to vote for them. They may get some a little bit more as a protest, but their sort of like core base like vote I think is really like they're very strong in like certain areas, and then they don't really tend to have a massive amount of support in the rest of the country. But yeah, Reform are still staying strong on top, and they have been for pretty much all of this year now. I think they tend to like sit around the sort of 30% mark. I mean, there's talk that YouGov kind of underrepresent them because of how they do their weighting for either undecided or people who say they won't vote. I'm not entirely sure exactly how it works, but that is what I've heard, and it would kind of explain how other polling companies, pollsters, like have results for Reform that are sometimes a little bit ahead, sometimes like a lot ahead. Like I saw one last week or week before that put Reform on I think 36%, which is a lot higher than everyone else. But there's only been one that put them on 36%. But there have been others that put them on sort of 35, 34%. Not that infrequently. So I think it's probably safe to say if you sort of, we'll have a look at the sort of a poll of polls, but my general feeling is they're probably on around about 32, 33%. Labour, I think, to be honest, probably realistically is on around 20, 21%. Tories probably on around 16, 17, 18%. Greens maybe 15, Lib Dems maybe 15. I think that's probably about right. A lot can change between now and the next election, which is, God forbid, hopefully sooner than 2029. But, I short of some kind of major catastrophe, I just don't see them, Labour, giving it up that easy because they know they're going to lose. But yeah, the Tories don't seem to be going anywhere. I mean, Kemi had that speech last week before. Or no, it was a bit of a while ago now, actually. It was from their conference. But yeah, it's changed nothing. She had a tiny bit of a bounce, but it's sunk back down again. But I just generally don't think people are that interested in what the Tories have to say because, they can say what they like, but they had 14 years and nobody trusts them anymore. So, let's scroll down, and I use Britain Alex because it's easy to read, and they tend to have like the most up to date stuff in their feed. So we go down to I think this October 26th, so it's about 8 days ago. But this was at the time this was a poll of polls. And so, yeah, as you can see, Reform on around 31%. They sort of peaked and dipped, but people they tend to like over egg the importance of individual polls. Like for example, you see like this one here, Reform 27%. They've had others that put them on like regularly 30, 32, 33%. And every time they would get one that was like 27%, you get these accounts on Twitter being like, oh my god, Reform have peaked, that's it, it's over for them. Polls go up and down all the time. It doesn't really mean a lot, to be honest, like individual polls. You kind of have to look at the overall trend and see that bigger picture. And when you do look at that bigger picture, it tells you really everything you need to know. Yes, you can argue that Reform maybe plateaued a little bit and they're not growing as fast as they used to, but the general trajectory is still up and has been for the well, this entire year, really. Um, the Tories, maybe you can argue they've stemmed the losses, but they are significantly down from a year ago. I mean, they talk about how great this. A lot of them talk about how great this year has been under Kemi. Not been funny when you look at the election result last year. They came second on 24% in that election. They're now on 17-18%. That is not a good year. I mean, if that's a good year, I dread to think what a bad year is. But you can see like roughly where Zach Polanski won because they've kind of shot up a little bit. Um, I It's a bit early to say, but I do kind of think that we could end up in a situation where maybe not a completely two-party, like two-horse race, but I do think it could predominantly be Reform versus the Greens, and I think the amount of people from either Labour or the Conservatives that switch to like Reform and the Greens respectively, I think, you know, could have a big impact on the outcome. Um, I I want Reform to win. I think they're going to win, but it is a bit early to say, and anything can happen between now and then. They're doing a lot of the right things. I mean, we had this week, Nigel did his speech about how Reform's doing a bit of an economic reset with their policies. I think they still want to do pretty much all the same things they did, but they're just recognising that basically because Labour has screwed the economy so much. I mean, I'm going to try and be charitable to them. The Tories didn't leave it in that great a state, but they haven't made it better. They've made it worse. I mean, Rachel Reeves is just making it worse. It's so hard to cut them any slack because they're continually making choices that just do not put us in a good stead and allow us to, or give us any kind of potential of getting into a better space. So, yeah, I mean, I just don't see that Labour is really going to end up doing anything to get us out of this mess, and so that is obviously going to have an impact on what Reform is able to do. Hopefully not for the entire of their first term, but at least for a year. I think they would probably have to have a budget or two where it's just tax cut, not tax cuts, where it's just spending cuts, so that they can sort of reverse a lot of the insanity that Labour's brought in. I mean, the thing is, when people talk about like spending cuts, they look at like what the Tories did in the 2010s, and I don't think really that's a good representation of what spending cuts should mean in practice, because what they did was they cut a lot of like public services, which is not really what you should do. I mean, if we're going to talk about it from like a national, I'd say I'm a nationalist. Reform, I would argue, is trying to push for that sort of civic nationalist position, but if they're going to do that and it even be like economic nationalist, the first thing you should cut is foreign aid. And yes, I know it's only not like 0.5, 0.7% of GDP, but that is still a lot of money, and it's somewhere to start. And I think it's that kind of signalling that what they're going to start cutting first before they get to those other things. It's like with welfare. I think a lot of people will I do actually think a lot of people will be willing to stomach cuts to welfare, but they don't want to see it happen to them before it's happened to people who shouldn't even be on welfare in the first place. So, for example, like the fact that we have, I mean, you get these people on Twitter who say, oh no, there are no foreign nationals claim benefits, they're not allowed to. We know that's rubbish. There are plenty of them that do, because they find some other caveat or way to get around the system, and there's plenty of lawyers and legal advisors who will help them do that. So I think Reform have pulled out this figure that it was like we spend something like 1.6 million or £6 billion or something. I can't remember the exact figure, but there are billions of pounds being spent on benefits for not even British citizens born abroad, but like foreign nationals every year, which is obviously insane. So I think before we even get to cutting like other types of welfare, which we will have to do, but before we even get there, you have to signal to people that you're going after like the stuff that shouldn't even be happening first. And I hope and I think that is what Reform is going to be doing, and because honestly, it's beyond anything else, it's the best way to get consent for these kind of cuts, which just have to happen because we can't afford to keep doing this. I mean, the successive governments have not been honest with the public about, like, you hear from the Tories like, oh, we have to live within our means, blah blah blah, but what does that actually mean in practice? Well, if we're going to fund our spending, either we have to put taxes up, which you can only use so much because, if we were to go into like Laffer theory, eventually you get to a point where increasing taxes does not increase tax revenue intake. So, you know, I don't know exactly where that point is, but I think we're probably near enough there already because the Tories already put taxes up to a pretty high point. I think it was a 70-year high, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, there just isn't really the room to keep increasing taxes without just basically hurting the economy. And so, what does that leave? Well, you've either got printing money, which adds to inflation, but a lot of people don't understand that, or you issue bonds. But again, like the bond markets are not gonna like it, are not gonna take if it doesn't look like we can repay our debt, which is the kind of point we are getting to because we are spending so much money every year servicing our debt, and to keep up with spending commitments, we're just borrowing more and more and more each year. I think I heard yesterday that like just in this term, Labour has already increased the national debt by something like 160, 180 billion. I mean, that's just insane. We can't carry on like this. So whoever wins next, that is what they're going to have to contend with. And the Greens can say they want to spend all they like as much. There's this modern monetary theory where they think that because central banks control the money supply and can print money, that you effectively can't go bust. Well, no, you can't go bust, but what you can do is devalue your currency so much and have such high inflation that you just cripple your economy anyway, which is obviously what you've seen in countries like Venezuela and Zimbabwe. Don't want to repeat that here because it never ends well. But yeah, I think as long as reform can start to see the sort of the deficit go down, the spending go down. I think it's a bit folly to try and just because what the Tories did, they thought that they could just pay down the debt. I just think that's folly. It's just not a good idea. The only real way out of this is just to grow our way out of it, and we have to start doing pro-growth things, which Reform have signalled they want to do. So, to start with, just on net zero, that is 46% of our electricity costs are imposed costs by government. A lot of people don't realise that. The government keep telling us, oh, the reason energy costs are high is because of the war in Ukraine and blah 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 blah. That played its part, but the thing is, right now, oil and gas prices are pretty low. So, but our energy bills are not going down; they're going up still. Now, I'm no expert on how the energy markets work, but if 46% of our costs are imposed costs by government, well, that's a place to start looking at. Because frankly, when they talk about how renewable energy is so cheap, well, that's because it's not actually that cheap. It's more expensive, but because we're basically putting imposed costs on our energy bills to subsidise the energy industry, that's why it artificially looks on a balance sheet like it's less, but it's not. And so the real answer really for a country like ours is nuclear. Renewables are not a good investment. Wind is far too intermittent. You just can't rely on it, and we don't have enough intense sunlight all year round to justify the expense of solar. If you lived in a desert country or a very hot country, solar makes complete sense. Well, I don't know why you wouldn't do it, but here it doesn't add up. It's stupid. If people want to make their own investment in it, fine, go for it. But in terms of government subsidising it to have a massive expansion of it, terrible idea. So yeah, I think that's pretty much where we're at. That if you look at different pollsters like here with Opinion, they have Reform down, but on 30%. So there is a lot of variance in these pollsters, and yeah, I think. We've got the budget coming up soon. That is going to be a disaster for Labour because, just as they said today, they're going to put taxes up. They're going to have to renege on their manifesto pledge, but it's their own fault because they thought they could just keep increasing spending and that we would somehow be able to afford it. We can't. So yeah, they're going to be forced into that position. But I don't really see a lot changing in the near future. Reform has some more announcements to come out. Maybe after the budget, they might get a little bit of a bump. We'll have to see, and yeah, but I'll be looking at those new polls when they come out, and I'm probably going to do maybe one of these videos like every week, just sort of a weekly roundup of my thoughts. So yeah, catch you all next time.